what was the good and the bad of what you saw of Caleb Williams in year one?
Man, that audio was like a trip down memory lane that I never wanted to go down again. That was awesome. I appreciate that, Alex. The Yeah, I mean, it honestly was kind of exactly what I think I expected, where there were unbelievable flashes. Maybe not as many flashes as I would love to have seen as far as like extended plays, super wow plays early on in the regular season. But I think I saw the talent, uh, the arm angles, the ability to extend, create. But man, I mean, just the obstacles that I thought he was going to face coming into that organization with the pass pro issues up front, with what I perceived as a perimeter that probably wasn't as good as people wanted it to be. Uh, you face those challenges over the course of a whole season. People start getting fired. I think it got even worse for me early on with the Hard Knocks thing. I know people came at me sideways, but there were a number of things that I would say were video evidence of things maybe not going in the right direction early. And even if they were semi-staged for Hard Knocks, they were still uncomfortable for me, and it wasn't something that looked like it was a roadway or a roadmap to success. And you saw those things play out in real time, really. And the crazy thing for me is I'm a fan of the fans of the Chicago Bears. I'm not necessarily a Bears fan by any means, but I respect that fan community and the support, because they are the one of ones, in my opinion, in the league. They are that locked in, and I appreciate them. But watching the film every week, it was painful. It really was. There were many pain points over the course of that season, and I'm excited to kind of wipe the slate clean and see what it looks like with a new regime that hopefully is a lot more demanding, has a lot more accountability. We interchange out some pieces, and hopefully it goes in a whole new, better direction.
Man, that's well said. JT, we're excited to move forward with a new staff and a new nest, but this report, this excerpt of the book from Seth Wickersham, has kind of re-inflamed the conversation, and we want to figure out exactly what is on Caleb, what is not on Caleb. And, I'm sure you read the article, and like the image of him ending up watching film alone and saying, I don't know what I'm looking for. We had a conversation yesterday with Kurt Warner, who really believes in like the personal responsibility of the quarterback to find the lessons, find the teachers if that's what he needs, to learn stuff. But we watched this, and I personally feel like the coaches and the head coach should have figured out a way to get the kid what he needs. Like, that's their job. Where does the personal responsibility start and end for you, for a rookie quarterback in a mess of a situation?
Well, many things here. I didn't read the article, have no interest in the article. I've got bits and pieces enough to understand what you're asking and what they're talking about. And I love Kurt. Kurt and I probably disagree a little bit in this regard, where I would say I would probably come down somewhere in the middle. That's probably not the greatest, cleanest answer for most people. But I do think that there has to be some sort of framework or scaffolding in a situation, especially for a first round guy. I think a guy, and I'm just speaking for Kurt here, but as a guy who was a low round draft pick, 6th round pick, or maybe a guy who wasn't drafted, you're never going to be forced into a situation like Caleb was as the first overall, as someone coming in with all sorts of hype. To think that they already know how to do that, I think would be a big mistake for a lot of coaches in any organization, to be able to think that somebody has all the answers coming into the league. And I would never want any player, not just a quarterback, but any player in the building, to feel like they're on it on their own in any aspect of the game if I was a coach or a teacher. So there's certainly some fault on both sides. Now, that being said, for a guy who's going to be such an achiever, who's someone who wants to come in and turn a franchise around, there's going to have to be some level of personal responsibility to also seek out that information. And I also would imagine, I've never explicitly asked, but I know that in Caleb's world or orbit, he has access to some of the best football minds in the world as far as teaching not only throwing mechanics, but ball at the highest level. And so, yeah, it might be frustrating to have to go outside the building. Maybe you shouldn't have to go outside the building, but I think that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, in my opinion, in that regard.
Who taught you how to watch tape effectively, and who was the best that you ever were in the room with when it came to that?
So, I mean, here's the thing too, bro. Like, my whole job at this point is watching film and communicating. So I get probably more experience than most. When I got into the league, now coaches up along the way, I had great coaches from an early on high school level, college level. But when I got into the league, the guy who taught me NFL offense was Mike McCarthy. And so the way that he taught it provided me with multiple lenses to be able to, I think, better understand it and quote unquote watch film. I also got a chance to learn from what I considered like a grinder of a quarterback, Jake Delhomme, who was a veteran guy in the league, and had kind of created his own path that was very open and shared. And I, wanted to learn. So I was always kind of that like annoying golden retriever, like asking questions of them and that's not even talking about my position coach. So there are a lot of resources available, in my opinion, anecdotally for me, but I also was very proactive. I was fascinated, and at that point, I probably wanted to coach. So I wanted to know as much as I possibly could about everything. And so, I do think that there is probably it's an interesting story to feel like, oh my God, how could this guy not have the resources to go out there and be successful? But I could also say where, man, if you're unhappy and you're the guy, walk in there, put your fist on the table, say, hey, I need to understand, what do I need to know? What do I have to know walking into the building on Monday to be able to be successful in this system? And then again, if you're the coach, I was around a number of systems that would come in and say, hey, all right, the starter is responsible for the corners. The backup is responsible for the safeties. The third guy is responsible for the nickel. When we show up on Wednesday morning, everyone's going to have the capacity to talk about these guys and fill the room in a deep dive about what we're going up against our opponent this week. So you had this built-in runway to be able to say, yeah, I might not be watching film like, hey, what's the game on the interior when we run inside zone or duo? Like, I don't care playing quarterback, but I do want to know personnel-wise what we're dealing with on the perimeter, and I don't have time to watch 5 guys in detail, but I can rely on the room to elevate us collectively to be able to come in here with a detailed plan of our opponent every single week. So little things like that, that's all dependent on the system, the organization. Every organization, every room is going to be a little different.
In your opinion, how should a QB room look from a personnel standpoint?
Hall of Famers. It's a living organism. It's a moving thing every year. Every year is going to be a little bit different. I think the best quarterback rooms are rooms that feel like there is a collective spirit for the person who's playing to be at their absolute best every single week. Some rooms might be competitive, where we might have a camp battle. Some rooms might have a very clear pecking order, but there's got to be some element of being pushed. There's got to be some element of collaboration where we can, hey, what do you see? Did you see this? What do you see on the sidelines? What do you see on film? What do we see on third down? Can we use this collectively to elevate our game so that you feel like you're all going in the same direction? But I do think it's a unique cocktail of competition, collective push in the right direction, input, feeling like you're being heard, feeling like you're making a difference, because only one guy gets to play in that regard. So it's a little bit unique, but it's all about, hey, can the dude who's playing play at a really high level for this room, this organization to go in the direction that we all want to go, or else we're all probably going to be looking for new teams.
Yeah, Lawrence is very happy and was hoping for a veteran like Case Keenum. And here's Case Keenum now in the room with Caleb Williams. So he's got somebody. We're talking to JT O'Sullivan, former NFL QB, founder of the QB School. These are the quarterbacks that you played with, among them Favre, Carson Palmer. You mentioned Jake Delhomme, Kyle Orton, obviously, Rex, and Rex Grossman. Tom Brady, that's pretty good. Who was the best at really kind of guiding you, and also just still being cool in that way?
I mean, I hijacked so many things from all of those guys. I think the guys that I probably resonated the most with, that had the most meaning in my career, were probably Jake Delhomme, and then I was around Brad Johnson in Minnesota, and those guys were just so authentically themselves. They were comfortable. Brad Johnson had already won a Super Bowl, so like they had already, they had come into their own and established their path. Jake kind of took on a different level when he went to Carolina and went to the Super Bowl, but those guys that just understood their game, that were able to contribute to the team, maybe not as the guy, because of that, and maybe wasn't necessarily going to be my opportunity on most teams I went to. And so just being able to kind of pick and choose little things from all of those games, not try to force feed it on my game, but just kind of take what I could to elevate what I could do in whatever role was kind of presented to me as the season went along.
So authentically themselves, speaking our language there, man, because like that was not what Matt Eberflus was. Not to bury him, but like it was so obvious he was. You know, he was a defense.
Didn't like the haircut or the beard or whatever the hell they were talking about.
The glow up. No, dude, he knew he was a defensive coordinator impersonating a head coach, to be honest. He just kind of knew that. So like, you know, because he could have gone in there and sorted out this personal dynamic that you're talking about. But like, you were around Martz and Singletary and Adam Gase and Lovey and John Fox and Marvin Lewis and Norv Turner and, you know, Rod Shudzinski. So like, who was authentically themselves and a real good communicator amongst those dudes?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of those guys were authentically themselves, and sometimes that rubs your ass the wrong way, you know, which was the problem with a lot of those guys. But I appreciated it. Like a guy like Mike, that you know, I was never with him in Chicago, but was with him in multiple stops, and I have a lot of respect for Mike Martz. He was nothing but honest with me. I might not have always loved the way he went about it, but I appreciated his candor. I appreciated how explicit he was with his expectations. And that's just not what I encountered at every organization. And so you get somebody who's comfortable like that, who at least they might be demanding and they might have high standards, but yeah, get in line, bro. We're in the NFL. Like, yeah, that should be the expectation. You know, I might not like the language that you choose to communicate with or how you choose to communicate, but I don't care. Like, I want to get better. We all want to get better. You're not going to hurt my feelings in a meeting. Those types of things that I think, you know, maybe aren't for everyone, but you kind of get filtered out over the course of the league. I always just respected people that elevated my game, that gave me a deeper, better understanding, that helped me play better, and that at the end of the day, you felt like cared about you. Like it was more than just, you know, a jersey or a number or, you know, a spot on the roster. It was something where they were invested in your success, just like we were invested in the success of the team and the organization.
JT, you continue to do a service for Bears fans that are there inside of that Patreon community for QB School. I'd love to know, what do you think is interesting and matches between Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams?
Oh man. Well, I would say the kind of unlimited potential, because I think of Ben Johnson as a very creative offensive architect who took, you know, certainly have a number of pieces in Detroit, but I don't think a whole lot of people before he got to Detroit, myself included, had any idea who the hell he was. And so to take a very strong offensive line, some nice pieces on the perimeter, get a young tight end, get a guy who essentially playing quarterback nobody wanted in the league. Now, he might have been a first overall pick at some point and a Super Bowl quarterback, but people weren't beating on the door for Jared Goff. And to lean into the strengths of that unit and make them one of, if not the premier offense and scheme in the league, is something that you would be fired up for any quarterback to be associated with, let alone a guy who I personally am very high on in Caleb Williams' skill set to be able to go create, extend, lean into what he does really well. So I'm excited to see what Ben does, leaning into the strengths of Caleb's game, because I think he did a great job of allowing Goff to be Goff at its best. And so what does that look like for Caleb? I honestly don't think we know. I think that's up to them to determine, and that's got to be kind of the exciting thing about it. Now, I still think, and this is going to get in people's feelings, man, I still think we've got a lot of chess pieces that will probably be moved around on the perimeter or you know, some hurty feelings on this process. But once those things align into guys that, you know, fit the mold of what they were doing in Detroit, as far as effort, as far as attention to detail, as far as yak, I think it's going to be pretty damn exciting to see what this unit looks like.
Some of your breakdowns last year, I thought that you were very honest and clear about your frustration with some of the things you were seeing from non-quarterback players on the Bears. When it came to looking at whether it was route running, route combinations, body language, what ticked you off about some of the things that you saw, like with DJ Moore, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too, where what I do is through a quarterback centric lens, but so much of what the quarterback's performance or outcomes is tethered to other people, other positions, play calling, scheme, execution up front, execution on the perimeter. That I by default will lean into and go into those types of things that I find are interesting. And for me in the league on Sundays, there's so much attention to detail that goes into what happens up front and on the perimeter. And if we're talking about the perimeter, it's the easiest to see. It's a lot harder to see upfront play, the line, how they pick up a game, the pass pro. You have to understand it. Sometimes you don't even know what the call is. You don't know what the rules are. You don't know what the technique is being taught. But on the perimeter, there are really only so many different combinations. There are really only so many different ways to be on time with certain routes. And when you notice that that stuff is not consistently happening, and that you see what I would consider effort concerns, or people not going what looks like they're 100% consistently, that to me, it's certainly a shot at the player, but it's really a shot at the whole unit, because there's no way that that can happen in a team, in my opinion, at a team that functioned at a high level on either side of the ball, that you would allow that to happen as a coach, because you would get in front of the team on Wednesday morning or Monday and put it on the big screen and put a circle around it and say, this type of effort is not acceptable. And you have to be willing to stand on it and own it. And if it continues, you got to deal with it and you got to make a change. But there's no, people feel that. You can see that. There are other guys that watch the film. If you play offensive line, guess what? You watch your technique, then you watch the ball. Then you watch the guy who gets paid the most. Like those things, that's just how it works when you're watching film. And so to allow that to go on and on and on and feel like, am I I know I'm not the only person watching it, because we got thousands of people in this Patreon community also watching it, but I feel like I'm the only one living through it every single week. And I could not imagine watching that film on Monday, like down the hall from some of these cats, and just being like, yeah, we're good. We'll roll it back next week, see what happens. Like it just that part of it was crazy frustrating, and I can't imagine it continues.
Well, the new sheriff in town does not allow that kind of thing, nor does apparently Antoine Randall, his assistant head coach. We saw him get in Jamison Williams' face many times in Detroit. So look, Luther Burden is here to challenge DJ Moore in some ways, and Rome Odunze. Colston Loveland is here to challenge Cole Kmet in some ways. I wonder, do you have any feel for, who are going to be the targets of choice, or who would be the guys that you would trust from this batch that the Bears have put together here?
I mean, to me, it starts and stops with Rome. We'll see what else of those guys, how it shakes itself out. I can't imagine necessarily all those guys touches survive this kind of regime change. That's just the reality of how these things work. I actually this is going to sound counterintuitive unless you're, listen to my rants all the time, but I actually thought Cole Kmet looked significantly better early last year. I thought he looked faster. I thought he looked more precise and explosive on the perimeter. And then it just didn't translate to production. So either there was a disconnect as far as expectations or whatever, but I could easily see them thriving in a 12 personnel, type of unit or system, with him going back to what he was so good at when I would joke around about being a, eligible tackle. But, I think that there's a blend there for him to be really successful. I don't know what's going to happen on the perimeter, because there are only so many touches. The expectations seem to be pretty clear as far as effort. We'll see what that looks like. I mean, it really doesn't matter what I think or what we think. The film will reveal itself. It really will. And the film up until this point has said that certain guys are going to really struggle with those kind of expectations.
JT, how can people join that Patreon community of yours?
Oh, that's a good question. I have a website. You could also go to Patreon. The Patreon world for me right now is very college football centric, coming out of the draft and kind of looking at the guys who will be eligible next year. But once we get into the fall, there's no way around it. I have certain groups. The Chicago group, the fan base, has high expectations for the channel, and I enjoy the expectations that they see their film every single week. So it's something I lean into when it comes to supporting this unit.
The QB School Join that Patreon community and support JT O'Sullivan. JT, thank you so much for being generous with your time today. We truly appreciate it.
No problem, fellas. Appreciate it, and circle back in the fall.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
we
let's
will.
do it. Let's do it.
We will. That is JT O'Sullivan. And I mean, if the reaction via text and people inside the mob is any indication, people really enjoy that, and they should. He's great at this.
Yeah, for sure. And the expectations are real. And I keep thinking about what Olin Kreutz told us, which is that, all right, Caleb, the team is now invested in you. You invest in them. Like,
yep.
What do you got? And but the real talk about DJ Moore and the real talk about some of the effort level is I think it's been coming to a head for a while, and there just was not deliberate and fearless communication from the coaching staff last year, and it could not have been more obvious. And that is not going to be the case with this new group, this regime change.
I think I love that interview. I really did. Alex, great job getting JT O'Sullivan and giving us all of the background stuff too. Outstanding producing by you, young man.
Oh, and by the way, the open was Tanny's.
We know
everyone knows this.
Everyone knows that the open was Tanny's.
Really?
Some of the mob like, Alex, he's doing opens now?
Except for JT. It's all right.
Yeah,
he's not threatened at all because no one can do what he does.
You didn't have to even say that. I'm perfectly content with JT O'Sullivan thinking that you went the extra mile.
I knew you were, Tanny. I thought about hopping in and saying, actually, that's our guy, Chris Tanno. That's usually my gig. This time I was like, you know what? Let's let Alex have his moment. He established the connection with JT. Let's let JT think that Alex is just a freaking god of a producer.
Because we do.